first Silverbird Selection review of 2022. Happy New Year to you all, and I hope you had a good Christmas and New Year. So today I'm looking at a Silver Range release from 1986. It's Micro Rhythm Plus. This is the follow-up to Micro Rhythm, also released in the Silver Range the same year, I believe, presumably a bit earlier. So this is not a game, it's a utility. It's basically a drum machine sequencing tool. So we'll take a look at it now. It's a very common game to find out there. My copy cost £1, and you can quite easily find copies in bundles or individually for next to nothing. It's not really particularly desirable. So let's take a look at it and see what enhancements there are compared to the original Micro Rhythm. Let's begin then by looking at the packaging. As you can see, typical Silver Range packaging. We've got an interesting image of a conductor on a smashed cymbal of a drum kit, lots of drums around him. We've also got a guitar in the background and several sets of lips, one of which seems to have vampire teeth in it. I just don't know what's going on there. The logo Micro Rhythm Plus, not too bad. They seem to have Pac-Manized the C in Micro there, which is fair enough. That's on the spine as well. And on the back cover we've got two screenshots, one of the utility and one of the loading screen, and it says 4 fun and funky rhythmic sounds to get down to. We'll get into what that means in a moment, but also I just want to show you in comparison to the original artwork, the original cover of the first version of Micro Rhythm. There it is. It's probably marginally better than that, but not much by much. But what's notable is on the back cover of that, it's got exactly the same two screenshots, so I'm not really expecting the game to be, or the utility, sorry, to be any different from the original. I think the main difference is there's more sound sets to play with. That's what's sort of intimated on that description there of 4 fun and funky rhythmic sounds. So there we go, that's the back of the packaging. Let's move on and look inside. So inside we've got the usual list of Silver Range games, and then we get straight onto the instructions, which are 2 pages. Micro Rhythm Plus, copyright Simon Pick, gives you an overview of what Micro Rhythm is, which is very similar to the original instructions of the first version. The main difference is that you've now got, as I've mentioned, the 4 sets of different sounds, each of which has to be loaded as a separate version of the program off the tape. So we've got Micro Latin, Micro Disco, Micro Vocal, digitized voice samples, that could be interesting, and Micro Tune, a more melodic section for funky rhythms. So as it says there, you've got to load them off the tape as an individual program, so there's 4 copies of the utility on the tape, obviously. You've then got the load instructions, and then you've got all the instructions of how to use the utility, which I'm not going to go into because I covered that in my review of the original version, which was done in May 2020. One thing I do want to point out though is someone's written stupid here with a lot of arrows. I guess they weren't enjoying the instructions or how to use this utility. So yeah, someone's very nicely written stupid with a lot of arrows and squiggles there on the instructions. So yeah, that's enough of the instructions. Let's get on and load the first version of the program and see how it pans out. Okay, so I've loaded the first of 4 iterations of this program off the tape. As you can see at the bottom there, it says this is Micro Disco. Otherwise it's identical to the original Micro Rhythm. All the layout of the screen and the options are all the same. I'm not going to go into any detail about how to use the utility. I did that in my original video, which I will put a link to in the corner of the screen right now. So if you want to find out more about how you create your own drum loops and beats and things like that, then that's the video to watch. What I'm going to do here is basically just test out the different sound sets that are available in the 4 different versions of Micro Rhythm Plus compared to the original. So this version has the disco samples in it, and there's already a song loaded in by default when you load the program. I am going to actually try and load my own song that I did from the original version in, because I saved that onto a tape, so why not? I may as well give it a go. But for now, let's just play the song that's loaded in, and you do that by pressing F1 to go to songwrite mode, and then S to play the music. So let's see how that goes. I think you get the idea. It sounds okay. I mean, it sounds a little bit like dancey disco beats, I suppose, and that's about all you can say about it. So as I said, I'm going to try and load in my drum sequence that I created in the original Micro Rhythm from the tape that I saved it onto. Let's hope it loads in. I'll try that now, and then we'll see how that sounds with this sample set. Well, unfortunately that doesn't seem to have worked, because what it's done is just load back in the original song that was in there. So much for that idea. So basically all I can really do now to compare the sounds is to just load the other versions of the program in and see how the sounds compare. There's really nothing much more I want to do with this, because I've already done all the creation of songs and beats and loops and things like that in the original review. So I'll get on and do that now. I'll load the next version in and let's see how the sounds compare. So I've loaded up iteration 2 of the game. This is Micro Latin, as it says at the bottom there. This does have a different song by default than the first one, so let's have a listen to that song now. So you can definitely tell there are different tones, different notes, different samples for that version of the program. Nothing outstanding again to my ears. Can't get it to stop, there we go. So yeah, nothing outstanding to my ears. It's just some drum beats just like the first version. I guess if you're into making drum loops and drum samples and things like that, then I guess it's good to have a variety of different samples to use. So that's that one done. Let's load the third one up. Here we are then with version 3 of the program. This is micro-tuned, and this was described as a more melodic section for funky rhythms. So let's have a listen to this one. Again, it's got its own song incorporated into it by default when loading, so let's have a listen to that. So no doubt that's very different to the first two, and there's some quite good samples in there, some guitar sounding samples, pretty cool. Again, I've not got any great desire to do anything with this stuff, but you can definitely see that there's value in this product in as much as the various different sample sets allow you to create different kind of drum loops. So that's all well and good. That's that one done with. And let's move on to the final one, and then we'll do some review scores. Here's a final version of Micro Rhythm, or Micro Rhythm Plus then, the Micro Vocals this one's called. Again, it's got its own version of the song and its own samples, so let's have a listen to that song, and this is all vocal samples as you might expect by the name of it. So these are pretty interesting. They do remind me of Simon Pick's game Slimy's Mind, that had some voice samples in it as well, and I suspect some of those voice samples were the same as these ones. So let's finish that off. Okay, so there's the 4 versions. Interesting for sure. Not sure how practical they would be for anyone who wanted to create drum sequences back in the 80s, but there you go. So let's move on to the review scores, and for the most part these are going to be exactly the same as the original version. There's a couple of variances, but there's not a lot of difference in it. In terms of the usability of it, you've seen all that in the original review that I did, and I will be giving it the same score in this one. I said back then, and I'll say the same thing now, I think once you get to grips with the different aspects of it, it's fairly easy to create your own sequences and songs. The practical value of it I'm not so sure about. I guess it would depend what use you could make of it back then, and I'm not sure it's got any use in the modern world, but there you go. So let's get on to the scores. Packaging, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. That's what I gave the original version as well. This packaging, it's slightly different, perhaps a bit more vibrant, but it's not really any better, I don't think. And the instructions are almost identical, other than it mentioning that there are 4 versions of the program on the cassette. So 7 out of 10 for the packaging. Presentation, the one difference between this and the original version is that this version doesn't have a nice loading screen. So I'm knocking it a point off for that, and I'm going to give it a presentation score of 4. Graphics, I gave 2 last time and I'm going to give them 2 this time. There's pretty much no graphics in it. Sound, because of the 4 sets of samples, I'm going to up it by 1 compared to the original version, so I'm going to give the sound 8 out of 10, and the playability, or in fact usability, last time around I gave it 5. Can't see any reason to give it any different this time, so I'm going to give it 5 out of 10 again. That gives it a total score of 5.5, which is exactly what it got for the original version as well. I've got to say that this new version does kind of make the original version redundant, so it was a bit of a strange decision by Firebird to release another version that made that prior version kind of useless, but there you go, that was the decision they made. In terms of whether it's worth $1.99, last time around I said it was, even though it's not something that I'm particularly interested in. I think if you wanted to make drum sequences to use in other applications, or be that music, live music as a backdrop to your own songs, or just within a game, I think it's pretty useful. It's not really got any value now, and there's not really much interest from myself in actually exploring it any further, but there you go. So there you go, that's my thoughts on Microrhythm Plus. Very much an enhanced version of Microrhythm, as you would expect. If you've got any thoughts about this utility, then let me know in the video comments, and I'll be back with a more familiar game review next time around. Thanks very much for watching, and bye for now.